We are studying in the book of Esther, and we have gone there to discover some principles about inner beauty. That's my main subject. But also, this is mainly for young people, for single people. It's for parents of children, and we are discovering some principles that need to be talked about in Christian families. It just so happens that Christian families are now becoming more rare. It may be that a family claims Christianity and is even saved, but most families no longer abide by Christian principles. There are even some churchgoers who get a politically correct sermon once a week and maybe get evangelized, but are not seeking out any of the Christian principles that go along with life. And so we're seeking out God's principles for the young people. And we want to be able to use these as guidelines of how we raise our own children and how they deal with life. Last week we looked at Esther and we looked at her background. We find out that she came through a lot of suffering, a lot of testing, a lot of adversity, and she came out on the other side of this shining like a new penny. And it was because she had Bible doctrine in her soul. She didn't become sour. She didn't become bitter. She didn't give up on life. She kept her blessings in the middle of adversity by her faith and walking in her faith. I want to give you tonight, before we begin, some of the historical background of the book in which we're reading. I discovered something very interesting about Persia and King Xerxes, the very king to which Esther will become married. Xerxes was the fourth king of Persia in its days of when the kingdom was at its maximum. Xerxes, who gained experience as viceroy of Babylon, lacked the tolerance of his predecessor. The previous king was Darius. Darius was the one who enlarged the empire and really made it what it was and brought it into prominence and made the Persian people rich. He lacked the tolerance of his predecessor, Darius, and treated harshly both Egypt and Babylon. This is the man Esther was going to marry. He would have preferred to direct his energies towards building palaces and monuments. And so he would have rather built nice buildings and built monuments, probably to himself, along the way, but he had to deal with other things. We'll keep reading here. But the Greek problem would not go away. So Greece was his neighbor, and they were very strong. They were strong militarily, and they were constantly threatening his empire, so that he had to work on military stuff. In 480 BC, isn't this funny? Because this is the exact time that Esther was in the picture. But the Bible doesn't talk about this. So this is something from history that's not mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Esther. But this would have been right about the time that the king got rid of Queen Vashti. He would have been basically a single man at the time. And before he married Esther, 480 BC. A Persian army accompanied by ships manned by Phoenician, Ionian, Egyptian, and Cypriot allies moved against Greece. So King Xerxes put together a big navy. And he says, by golly, we're going to take a fight to them. We're going to load up in these ships. We're going to sail over there. We're going to give them a battle. They've become belligerent, and we're going to teach them a lesson. A canal was dug through the Isthmus of Seine to avoid the dangerous promontory of Athos. That means right there around Greece, there were some real dangerous places that you had to sail around the tip of a point, and instead of sailing around into the rocks and all the dangerous places, they dug a canal through the land and sailed their fleet right through a canal. You can imagine what kind of manpower that took. Persia was a huge kingdom. They had lots of slaves. And so King Xerxes, he organized a slave labor force to dig a canal to sail his army through. Isn't that amazing? I think he was mad because he didn't have a queen at the time. He said, I'm going to go beat somebody up. All right. After a delay at Thermopylae, Thebes and Athens were taken by the Persians. And I don't know if you know anything about Greece, but Athens was one of their major cities. So this was a major military accomplishment, and Xerxes was probably feeling great about these victories that he had. But the Greeks inflicted a disastrous defeat on the Persian fleet at Salamis, near Miletus, and again at Plato and Mykel. So this is 4 different engagements, 4 different times that the Greeks put a whooping on the Persians out at sea. Xerxes was forced to relinquish everything beyond Asia Minor. And so he went to kick tail, and he came back with his tail between his legs. He got his tail with him. Isn't it amazing that some of the things that he faced when he went against Greece was the Greeks raised their children for battle first. And they taught them how to carry a sword, chunk a spear, and the Greeks actually were the first people who loved to work out in gyms. They thought that they would keep their bodies, whatever the peak of its physical condition, they believed they would carry that body on over into eternity. And so every day they would go to the gym and work out. And so you see the statues of these Greeks. Man, they are cut. They've got muscle everywhere. And these are the guys that Xerxes is going up against. Also, the Greeks did not rely on numbers. They believed that the individual soldier that was professional in his weapons was the way to go. And so that every day the Greeks trained, and they were trained killers from young men, and they were muscle-bound, and they were surgical in the way they carried out war. The Persians, on the other hand, did not believe in a lot of training. They didn't believe in raising their young ones so much in the gyms like the Greeks did. They believed in mass forces. And so they actually got into trouble because the Greeks would hold up in an area where they were not susceptible to a mass attack from all sides. They would back into a narrow place where you could only approach from one direction. They would lock their shields together, and they could lay them down. And then in this battle, we find out that the Greeks were also excellent sailors, and they were more like pirates than the Persians. They burned down their ships at sea. The last fact that I find from my International Standard Bible Encyclopedia is that Xerxes, he was assassinated in his palace in 465 BC. So that means that Esther would have been married 15 years and her husband would have been assassinated. Now, the Bible does not give us those facts, but we see those recorded in history. I have one other thing that I want to share with you. It comes from a very odd source. Jeff Cooper is one of my heroes. He was good friends with the Colonel Thien, and many times when you hear the Colonel teaching, he's making reference to these books, and he never alludes to the fact that he is, but many of his teachings are in Jeff Cooper's books also. And so when you read Jeff Cooper, many times you say, hey, I've heard that before, or I understand what he's talking about. And it's because Jeff Cooper had the same mindset as the Colonel. They were good friends. I don't know how often they talked on the phone and things like that, but they had to talk quite a bit because a lot of the same things you get taught from these two men. Jeff Cooper he was a born-again believer, but he taught more about firearms and self-defense and how to handle yourself that way than any other. And this is a very good book. It's called To Ride, Shoot Straight, and Speak the Truth. That's the name of the book. And he's going to explain to us why it's named that here in the inside. I want to read that to you because it has to do with the Persians. It says, to ride, shoot straight, and speak the truth. This was the ancient law of youth. These lines were cherished by Theodore Roosevelt, one of America's two greatest presidents, and her dozen or so great men. I thought the verse was American in origin until I went into the matter and discovered its ultimate source was Herodotus. Herodotus. He was an ancient historian. According to the father of history, the precept originated at the court of the great kings of Persia, exactly what we're studying about. This would have been a saying during Esther's time. The young boys would have known this saying that were raised with Esther. The precept originated at the court of the great kings of Persia, where wealth and power were so concentrated as to produce a style of life conspicuously unsuited to the upbringing of a young nobleman. You know what that means? They were so rich that if they kept their boys at home, they'd be no good. They'd be so spoiled, they couldn't be a king. They were so rich. You're talking about mounds of gold, silver. You're talking about anything you can buy, they could buy it. The rich Persian kings. They found out pretty quickly that if they kept their boys at home, they'd be playing Atari all day, and they wouldn't learn about life. They'd be playing, but anyway, they would be preoccupied with being rich. So here's what they did. Luxury and authority are not good for a young man. And if he enjoys such things in his adolescence, he is most unlikely to develop into a man of character. That means if he has an easy, soft life, he's not going to grow up with much character. I have discovered the same principle in my teaching. I don't know if you know this or not, but I've had friends come work for me that are down and out. Some of them for no reason other than they're just down and out. Down and out. Some of them for reasons they may just be fresh out of prison or jail. Some of them may have been on drugs, may have lost a wife. But I've had all these different kinds of men come and work for me. And they come and work for me, and I paid them very little. And I worked them very hard. But you know what happened? They gained purpose in life. And they found out they can do something. They can do something. They can start somewhere and they can stay busy all day long and they can learn something. They can learn a trade no matter how dirty or raw it is. And what happens is You put a foundation on a man by learning small things and rebuilding confidence. And most of these guys that come and work for me, whether they stayed 2 weeks, month, 6 months, when they went out the door, they went out and found better jobs. And they had a foundation of humility and authority and responsibility. And they were able to take that new job and say, you know what, I can do this. I can concentrate on this. And this is the same principle that the Persians used with their young sons. It says, therefore, as soon as the sons of the great were old enough to do for themselves, they were farmed out to the household of minor chiefs on the frontiers of the empire. That means they were sent out to the farms. They went out to the plains. They went out to the steer herders, the cattle farmers, the vineyards, the sheep herders, the goat herders. They were out here in the rough country. Their masters were told that the boys were to know no soft beds, no fine raiment, no rich food or wine, no philosophical complexities, no slave girls, and no money. Isn't that funny? Everything they had when they were rich was stripped away, and they were treated like a peasant. You sleep on that piece of plywood. You get up in the morning and you eat rice with a little sugar on it. You call that grits. You get lunch, and it's rice with a little butter on it. And dinner, it's rice with maybe a piece of lamb chop. And so they didn't know any rich food. They didn't know any wine. They didn't know any girlfriends. They went to work, and they built a foundation. What they were to learn was to ride like a Charon, ride a horse like a warrior, to shoot like Apollo. Apollo was a god of war. That means they learned how to shoot arrows, throw a spear, probably off a horseback. And above all, to speak only the truth. That means they were taught in an amazing integrity to speak only the truth. Tell the truth even when it hurts. With all of these attributes, they were deemed to fit to return to the court at the age of 18. So this means by the time they were 12, 14 years old, they were sent off to the edge of the country. When they're 18, they come back. So they're staying out there 4, 6 years on the farm, learning these things. What else they needed to know in order to become princes could then be easily imparted and taught quickly by their seniors. And so they took this foundation of humility and integrity, and then when they were moved back home when they were 18, they could easily be taught how to run a whole kingdom. This is certainly an antique notion, but what is newer is not necessarily better. Nor looking around us, even eventually so. He goes on to talk about his book. It says, there is little in this book about writing, but there is a lot about various aspects of shooting and art, which has been notably diminished in this 20th century, in which it has become most needful. By my great good fortune, I happen to know much about shooting, both technically and tactically, and in what follows I speak the absolute truth about it, insofar as God has granted me the ability to do so. Isn't that amazing? He used his natural talent to be able to write a book that saves thousands of lives. Jeff Cooper. This book, therefore, is not for the trepid, not for the faint of heart, not for the soft, nor the over-civilized. It is, on the contrary, for those who aspire to command of the unruly environment in which they now find themselves. And so when you see this, I don't know how to pronounce it in Persian, but Esther would have heard this, and her husband would have been taught these principles: to ride, shoot straight, and speak the truth. Now, we're going to go to Esther. I'm going to start back at verse 7. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. So it was when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, that Esther was also taken to the king's palace into the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so that he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people, or that she was a Jew, or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Each young woman's turn came to go in to King Xerxes after she had completed 12 months of preparation, according to the regulations for women, for thus were the days of their preparation of portion: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. I want to stop right there, and I'm just going to make one point tonight, and then we're going to work on that. The point is that every young woman has to be prepared to be in the presence of a young man. Now, it just happens that Xerxes was not a young man at this time, but we're going to use that principle. Young ladies have to learn how to handle themselves in dating. And so I'm going to look at tonight with you some principles of dating that the Bible does not say much about, because the period of time in which the Bible was written, socially, things were handled differently than they are today. You had many arranged marriages and things of this nature, and today that is not prevalent, especially in our society. And so we have in America what is called dating. Now, the first point I want you to know about dating is that I believe that it is good. Many people think of dating as a terrible principle, that it is evil, that it is maybe even sinful. But I believe that is good as long as you follow the right parameters. You need some guidelines. And so I believe dating is good, and this is why. As a young person, you are getting to be in the presence of a person of the opposite sex and make some mistakes. Make some mistakes, possibly, more than likely, with someone you're not going to marry. You figure out how to handle yourself. You say, whoop, I didn't handle that right. And that happens to every young individual, not necessarily in anything disastrous like premarital sex, but just a situation like this. A young man takes a woman out on a date, and he takes her out for a movie and dinner, and the first time he has her at the dinner table, he gets out a ring and he says, "I want to marry you. I'm in love with you." And it may be a girl that he thinks he's in love with. On the first date, man, he breaks the question. Well, do you know what happened? He scared her right off. She's saying, I'm not getting married for another 15 years. This guy's crazy. And so she carries on and says, no, thank you, and shoots him down and says, this guy's way too serious for me. I've got to move on. And so now, you know what he's learned? Okay, maybe I shouldn't ask them to marry me on the first date. Maybe I should hold their hand. And maybe we should just talk about life. And so, can you see how it can be good? You learn about how to handle the opposite sex. And you learn how to develop a relationship that is based on rapport. You may not have any. You may go out with somebody that's cute, and they may be a total communist. They may believe that all guns need to be taken away. And you may not find that out until you go on a date with them. And you can say in the back of your mind, well, this is not going to work out, but at least I got dinner. You see how that works? It's good because you learn about people. You don't just go out and pick somebody to marry. You learn how to handle yourself. And also, it can be exhilarating to be with another person and develop even friendships in this way. However, we need parameters. Should have been an A there. So we need parameters for dating. I'm going to talk about these parameters later on, but in today's world, dating has changed. You can't just send your 16-year-old daughter out, just load up in the pickup with a good old boy, and just think that she's going to be taken care of, be home at 10 or 11, and, just pray to God they're fine while you're gone. You can't do that anymore. There's too many dangers out in the world. And so we're going to talk about some ways that we can make dating more safe for our young people. And hopefully, wish we had more young men here. We just have young ladies tonight. We could teach them some. We'll talk some more about that. So we're going to supply some parameters for dating in a Christian way that is not so dangerous. One good thing about dating is you get to explore. You get to explore what is out there. And here's what you're going to find. You've been raised in Grace Bible Church, Gum Springs, Arkansas, and you've been taught doctrine. Not everybody's been taught what you've been taught. You're going to get to explore different sin natures is what's going to happen. You're going to see different weaknesses. You're going to see different personalities. You're going to see different characteristics in people that you're out with. And you're going to find out fairly quickly that you're going to have to be very picky about who you spend your time with and about who you let fall in love with you. Did you know you're going to have to guard? What you're going to find out, young ladies, you're going to have to be a little bit snooty. I know that doesn't sound very grace-oriented, but you can't let just anybody fall in love with you. You got to stop them and say, hold on now, don't fall in love with me yet because this is what's going to happen. And so you get to explore different people, different personalities, and this is the good thing about dating. It will It will help you understand who you want, what kind of qualities you want to look in a person that you might marry. If you decide to marry, you don't have to get married. And so you get to explore the human race. And it's kind of exciting because you never know what you're going to get. We talked about this earlier. You get to make some mistakes. Mistakes that you wouldn't want to make while you're married. And you're going to get to see people of the opposite sex make mistakes. Too aggressive. Not aggressive enough. Didn't dress quite right. Forgot to floss my teeth. Ate onions. So you can go down your checklist. Don't eat garlic. Don't eat anchovies. Don't eat onions. So you make mistakes. You see how you can make mistakes? Don't wear this type of makeup because it runs when the guy's truck air conditioner doesn't work, and now my face is run down in a pool. You get to make mistakes. Not only do you get to make mistakes, it will toughen you emotionally to be able to go out and date. And I don't know if you know it or not, but when you start dealing with another person, it's not all flowers. It's all not knighthood. And it's not everything that you may think it. You may like somebody a lot and be going out on a couple of dates with them, and then all of a sudden they don't call you back. You may decide you like them a lot. And then next thing you know, you drive by and this person's loaded up with another girl. And your heart's going to break. But you know what's going to happen? It's going to toughen you up emotionally. God uses things like this to grow you up. So don't go into dating thinking that you're just going to fall in love and everything's going to be hunky-dory in every situation. You're going to have to get toughened up emotionally and learn that it's going to take a lot of experience for you dealing with other people before you know how to handle yourself right. Now I'll go ahead and throw this out there. If you're serious about finding a mate for life, if you seem real easy to get, if you make yourself just real easy to get, guess what? The person that you like may be repelled by that. Sometimes you have to play a little bit hard to get. And this is one of the things that you learn to as you progress in your dating life that will toughen you up a little bit emotionally, and you'll grow up. Here's a fun point. There's an entertainment factor involved in dating. And this is what makes it so fun, especially if you're a girl. Because guys pay. And you get to go see movies, and that many times they're going to ask you, well, where do you like to eat? Well, you need to have a good list. Well, I love Olive Garden or Red Lobster. And they're thinking McDonald's dollar menu. See, and you get to, they get to take you out. And they may work all week and spend all of their money on taking you out to dinner. And it may not be necessarily dinner and a movie. It may be going out to do something fun. Maybe go climb rocks or go to the rodeo or a concert or something of that kind of thing. And so there's an entertainment factor that comes with dating that makes it exciting to be young. And It's always fun. We're going to talk about some dating parameters. These will be set by your parents or those in charge over you. And these, I'm going to give you some what I'm going to do is just give you some ideas that you can build upon. Don't write off the idea that you may have to go out on a date with your parents. I know that sounds lame. But if you're a young person and you're just starting out, guess what? Your parents aren't going to let you just go out with anybody. Maybe in some instances they might, but it's just because they don't care. They're just sending their kids off to get rid of them. They haven't taught them anything. And they say, well, they're just going to have to grow up fast. So that's not the way to do it. And so the parents may sit at one table in a restaurant, and the young people may sit at another, and they get to enjoy themselves under parental supervision, or the same thing at a movie show, at any kind of activity. And so you may start out your dating life this way. And parents, we may want to, if you've got young people growing up, you have to say, well, I may have to stay out on Friday night a little bit later than I want to, but this is something that I'm going to have to sacrifice. You may say to yourself, well, my parents are just too lame to take out on a date. They might be able to recommend to you, well, you know what? If you don't want me there, the only way I will let you go is if you decide that you would go with this person over here, because I know you hate me right now because I'm a parent, you're a teenager, but you get along okay with this such and such, and they're married and they're older, and that I trust them to keep an eye on y'all. So if you want to go out, you can go with them. Can you see how that works? We're getting a little bit looser there. The parents don't have to be there. Maybe someone else has to be there. I like this. You got to know your kid's personality. You better know their sin nature. You say, what about double date with kids of the same age? That sounds great, and that might be an entertaining thought. But you better know the kid, because if you send a double date out, and you got the majority of them that are hellraisers that want to go out and do something wild, it's not going to work out. It doesn't matter if there's 4 of them, that's just double the trouble. So if you know somebody that's real tame and sweet and more like an ascetic type personality, you might be able to send your kid out on a double date with people of the same age and be able to trust one couple. Say, you got my cell phone number on speed dial, don't you? And he starts going wrong, you hit it. I'll be right there. And they will tell on them so fast that it's not even funny. You see how that works? Now, as they grow older and they're still under your supervision, they've learned how to handle themselves. They know they're not going to get away with anything. They're growing on up. It is possible that you can let your children date one-on-one in a public arena. This is dangerous in our day and time. If you don't know the young man's integrity, I would not recommend this whatsoever. And he can be a wolf dressed as a sheep. So you better know what's up. And this comes where dads have to be willing to bust somebody. It's just like doing PI work. They have to be willing to follow them and see what they're doing. See if they're doing right. Find out where they're going and just sit back and check it out. See if the truth is being told. And be willing to bring a switch in public if things don't work out right. The maximum embarrassment factor. And so we go on here. See, that right there is what most people are starting at, is D. That's where our society is starting. Just send them away, as long as y'all stay in town. Private one-on-one dating will come much later. And this will come especially after a young woman has learned how to push a man's hand away and say no. To slap a hand and say, no, sir, you're not getting away with that. To be able to say, you can hold my hand tonight, and maybe if we go out again, I might let you kiss me on the cheek on the next day. You see how you got to be? You're going to have to know how to handle yourself. And on the next date, I might let you put your arm around me. Maybe. And so a young lady has to know how to handle herself. I would say a young lady at this point would know how to handle a weapon. To be able to go one-on-one on a date like this, she needs to be able to handle herself well. And hopefully, we talk about young ladies because that's what we have in front of us tonight. But young men have to be trained. They have to be trained how to open doors. They have to be trained how not to pig out when they go out to eat. For the young lady, you eat a small amount of food, and if you're still hungry later after you drop them off, you can go get the double Big Mac burger or whatever it is. You don't go to the buffet and eat 6 pounds of food when you're out on the date. These type of things. But also a young man has to be taught. You're going to protect this young lady in any and all circumstances by whatever means necessary. She wants to leave and go with somebody else, you're going to have to say, absolutely not. I'm responsible for you. I'm not letting you out of my sight. If he's around a group of people, he's going to have to be able to look and say if there's a danger there. And so young men have to learn how to handle themselves because they have a huge responsibility having someone else's daughter with them and being responsible for their safety or whatever is going on. And so there's some pointers on dating. I hope is there any questions?
How old do you think a girl should be when she starts dating?
Exactly, man. That's a great question. I wish I'd have covered that. I thought about it. I believe you need to go not only with their mental age, not necessarily the age of their body, because people mature at different rates and they know how to handle other people at different rates. Their mental age, but also the factor has to come in their spiritual age. Because if they're breaking into super grace, they're not going to have a real hard time saying, you know what, I'd like to remain a virgin for my marriage, for my husband. When they're breaking into that spiritual adulthood, that's a concept that can be in their soul that they can hold fast to. When they're in adolescence and babyhood spiritually, they're not mature enough to be able to have that dedication to their spiritual life that they need to handle the pressures of dating. And so I think there's two factors. Their how they mature in their mentality personally, and then also depending on their spiritual status. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? All right. I thank you for your attention and your attendance. We'll keep going in Esther.